Ready?
Okay, that first photo is Mum and I, and it was the day that we saw Migaloo, and I put this one in because he's apparently going past today. Yeah. Yep. So I had a look and I thought maybe it was last night, but this was in 2014. So until this morning, I really didn't know what I was going to talk about specifically, but I thought a good way to start off is saying, today is Migaloo Day. So that day, Mum said, you're not going to work, we're going to go out and wait for Migaloo, because she had been tracking him, and we went and waited, and he come along in the morning, and it was really lucky that day because there was a professional photographer, Anthony Brose. He used to live on the island, so he took that photo for us, and it was really special to share that moment. Like, you know, in terms of now seeing whales brings joy to people, and then with Migaloo, people around were also sharing in that joy. 1 minute. So the next one, for me to remember that moment, I started drawing him. I did a couple of versions, so you may recognise that image because I think I did that in 2014, and a version of it is with Council, Redlands Council, and the other one I screen print. So you may have seen them on tea towels and cushion covers. But for me, it's just saying that is me remembering that day with Mum. And how we... Oh, yep, 39. Okay, so I'm going good for time. So that was, I feel like, this second part of my arts career, I suppose. Like, I used to make quampi shell earrings and necklaces and sell them through Queensland Aboriginal Creations, which was on George Street and then around Elizabeth Street. And because it's quite heavy in terms of the way that you need to use it, you know, acid and sanding, I didn't want my kids around it, so I stopped. When I had my children, I stopped making the quampi shell. So I used to do quampi shell and earrings and necklaces and sell them through Aboriginal Creations. So going back to this second part of my career, like kind of my own renaissance, I suppose it was Migaloo that really kicked it off for me. That one, on the third photo, I did a poster, hand-drawn poster for the Quandamooka Festival, and that was the first year that the festival occurred. That was 2015, and that was Welcome the Whales. So this year it's in its 5th year of the festival, so I look back and I think I've really come a long way since those moments. You know, a lot's happened since then, but I like to look back and see the progression of my work. Is that the next one? But still. So that was done on canvas, and it's reused every year. It's put up at every Welcome the Whales. The next photo, which is now, it shows again that progression. So it went from experiencing Migaloo, drawing, putting him into the festival, making small porcelain ones, and then being invited to make the large Migaloo for the Commonwealth Games opening. That was the last job that I had with the Games, you know, participating in the opening. The medals were before that, but to see it, you know, the steps that it takes to, and the thought behind it, they really, what drew them to that particular work was me talking about how along that coastline, as he's migrating, people are waiting for him, people are sharing in the joy and speaking to people that you might not normally speak with. So they like that part of the story and try to include that in that opening. The fifth photo is of my hands and our yongay, our freshwater reed. So our Quandamooka young people here know about that reed and have woven with that reed. This is a mat making technique. I've got this book here because it also references, through my grandmother talking about our weaving as fine as lace, and then another reference in some notes that Mum's got around dilly bag and mat making as Granny did. So for me, I can know that my grandmother saw it happening. She was born in 1908. Something stopped. Something happened for her not to have that weaving technique. So I know she saw them, and then this is kind of bringing it back in a renaissance, of that particular work. So as my work's progressing, I'm doing onto that 6th photo. I've got my little studio shop in Dunwich. I really, I'm protected by the word studio, because when people come past and they say, "Oh, you haven't been open for 4 days," I'm like, well, it is a studio. Right now I'm...
It's not a shop.
No, it's not a shop. So I'm mostly at the moment open on Saturdays. I really love having that space. It's off the main track. It means people have to really kind of make an effort to be there or book in, and it means I can leave my work there. Before that I was working from home and doing markets and exhibitions, and then for me now having the space, which is coming up 3 years. So, they say a lot of businesses kind of close down after 2 years. I feel like I've made it through a bit of a trial run, and I'm still there. And I can't do it without the support of my family. So on that 7th photo, I don't like to talk about him too much, but I do have a husband. And I have 3 sons. I really do keep that part of my life quite private. I share about my mum, and I share my sister and the way that they help me with my work. And as you see, there's no photo of my dad, but my dad is always behind the scenes. He's drilling seeds, he's wiring stuff. He's even helped me do some of the stuff in here, with the wiring. And with the mermaid, he had as many cuts and stuff in his arms as what I did. So while I'm doing my work, I'm also juggling a family and their needs. And going back to, so the boys are here, Preston and Sterling, the 2 youngest. They're on a fallen log at Kapemba or Mayura Springs. And so one of the other bits of work that I did earlier on in early 2015 was talking about that space at low tide where freshwater meets saltwater, and this log and the mangrove roots are referenced in the exhibition here. So some small sculptural pieces where I've built ceramic, mangrove roots, and then the fallen log, and in the form of a driftwood piece. So that's at high tide. So the salt water comes in, recedes, and then at low tide, as the girls know, it's very shallow, and when you're laying in that shallow water, you see the little mangrove roots. We have a large midden that has been trampled, and so there's only shell remnants left there. But it does reference as a space where our people have gathered and continue to gather. So the next one, number 9, that is a piece called Where Freshwater Meets Saltwater, and it was in the Redland Art Gallery in 2015. The interesting thing about that is sometimes you regret selling things, and I regretted selling that. I really should have kept it. And the person who bought it heard about that, and she knew that the gallery wanted to buy it. Anyway, it's come back around sort of 4 or 5 years later that she wants to give the piece back to me. So that's the space. And I'm going to, as Judy Watson said, you really should keep a record of each of your pieces, whether it's photograph or put it into your own archive and put it away for your children. So I need to listen to that advice a bit better. That was on fabric and a lino tile, and was my first one. And it was through the exhibition connected to the waters of Minjerribah, and my first lino piece. Number 10 is some colours that were loose at Point Lookout. I've included that in here because it shows that, the vibrant red, and then there's pink and white in there, and extracting some of that and putting it into the work here, and other work. So I'm working on a piece at the moment, a public art piece for the Point. So that pink and the white and the yellow is going into the actual piece. That's going to be revealed, I think, in the end of August. So it'd be lovely if you come for it. They're about 2.5, 3 meters tall. So I just wanted to show that particular piece that's used in this one. The next photo is at 11. That was when I was over at Moreton, Mogumbin, which is another part of Connemugga, and with our mermaid story, it talks about the blood being shed on one of the beaches. So there was, at one point, my sister and I walked 10 k's to try and find this bit of blood in the sand, and we saw a tinge, and we think that's it. This is on the other side of the island. So that particular piece, because I haven't gone back since then. That was in January, not to that spot, January 2018. Collecting a bit. So I've run out of that. I don't have any more of that colour. I feel a little bit sad about that, but it means I'm forced to go back and then just recollect. These photos have been taken by Nikki Michael, just to make reference to that. And so taking those pieces and then smashing them pretty much into the paper. So trying to tell that story about the mermaid, how do we know where she lives? And I thought, I need to map it out. How can I map it? And I originally thought of doing a ceramic map, and it's like, oh, that's not going to work. And so when you're thinking about how to reflect on the work, how do you actually make it? What do you need to do? And I was like, well, what do I see and what do I know? So I thought that I need to make a clay map, because when you're on the boat, you come in and you see Dunwich, when you're leaving you see Peel, when you're going from Vicky Point you're seeing Coochie Mudlow, Macleay when you're arriving. So there's all these different points where you see this bright colour, and it's like, that's what our country is. It's these beautiful variety of colours, from black through to white. So the reds, purples, pinks, oranges, yellows. And that next photo is the original map that I did in my exhibition Search for Warrajamba. Not quite a regrettable sale, because it stayed in the family. Yeah. Somebody wanted to keep it. But what I've been able to do is, you can look at those pieces and say, that's that bit of the country. That's what it means to me. Over here, I've done a smaller version, and there's a few new colours that I've come across since, so I've incorporated that into this new map. It's much smaller, but I actually feel like it's paper. Yeah. Sorry? It's my favourite one that's in here. I don't know why, just whether it's because, you get better as you make your stuff, and I feel like I applied the clay better. Yeah. And so Troy and Amanda asked me last year, would you think about submitting some work for this Brisbane City Council Indigenous Art Program? And in the words of Judy Watson, she said, book yourself in and then make new work. So I thought, okay, this is an opportunity to make new work. And I said, I'd love to create something new. So bring in the clays, bring in that map making technique, and bring in another story about connected to our ancestors. I made a series of these woven works. So that one's over here, the Macleay piece, and those cotton tree sticks or taupan. Our people use them for spears, and then the inner bark to make string. So the string was then used to stitch the clay map together. So that photo taken down by my favourite beach at Lady Lock. And the last photo is Quampi shell. So it kind of takes me back to that original work that I made, with the Quampi shell earrings. What I appreciated what I did back then was enter into some awards. So one was the at that time Queensland Arts Memento Awards, and I was a finalist. So my Quampi shell earrings are sitting in like a catalogue from the early 2000s. Yeah. And so that's the Quampi shell. This is a very small one. And I'm finishing up with this because the island is in massive transition, and there was an announcement last week about the new Quampi Cultural Centre and the Quandamuka Arts Museum Performance Institute. So as an artist and as a resident and Quandamuka person, I feel very excited that there is a place to take our work locally. We've got this place here, potentially other places, but it means that there's somewhere on the island that artists and people can visit and contribute to. So I'll just pass it around.
And you can keep talking a bit more about that now, if you want to. Yeah. But, yay.
Thank you.
How did that feel?
I was like, yeah.
It's good, eh?
Yeah, there's some that I cut myself too short, but others I could have kept going.
Yeah.
It's an interesting format. Yeah.
So thanks Kenny and Tanya and girls, and Susan and Vicky and Jeff and Carolyn and Amanda and Troy.
Yeah. Good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Delvene, I got a question. Do you think you can tell us the story about the mermaid?
Yes.
Because I don't really know it very well.
Okay. So Mum said that there's her and her, two other aunties that talked about, and grandmother talked about a mermaid existing in the bay, and that's all they had, like just pieces of this story. There's a mermaid in the bay. Auntie Donna talked about it. Auntie Rosie was another one that talked about hearing about a mermaid in the bay. So it's like, okay, there's stuff here. What do I need to do about it? How do I make sense of it? And I asked Auntie Gwen. I said, Auntie Gwen, do you know, who's Mum's older sister? And she said, no, I haven't heard a story about a mermaid in the bay, but the closest thing was going to, because we're talking about Moreton, and she said, I went over to Moreton when I was 10 with the Perry family, and they pulled up and there was these whales being pulled up and there was blood everywhere and there was sharks circling, and she never wanted to go back to Moreton again. Anyway, so that's kind of a little bit to the side, which I'll bring back later, but Mum and I started going and looking at what are the records, and Archibald Meston, who was at the time, before he was the Southern Chief Protector of Aboriginal people, he visited the island and recorded stories and recorded some of our language, and there's references to Warrajamba being a conundrum, a riddle, that her blood is spilt on the beaches of Moreton Island, that she walked on land and swam in the water. So I thought, well, there's this white written record, and then there's this our own oral history. How do I make sense of it? And I feel like I'm still looking. So Meston also wrote about this shell and reed necklace from the island being traded. So when I did that exhibition last year, Warrajamba, making the map, like where she was from, like a family tree, my grandmother's words, and then I had Meston's words in a small artist book. So I tried to minimise the importance of his words, even though it was important. He wrote it in that kind of white sense that legitimises that story, but we know that there's a story that still exists, even though we don't have the full story. It's there. So I feel like I'm still searching. There's stuff that we've come across like even a woven bag that was donated into an institute in 1853. So there's from the island, from Moreton Bay, so with that beautiful diagonal line. You know, stuff revealing itself. Like the more you dig, I think the more that will come up. It's like we should have this already, we should know this, but what is there for us to pull back, to pull out?
Yeah, sure. If I see something.
What's
Yeah.
that?
It makes me want to be keep an eye out.
Yeah.
You see stuff all the time that sometimes is unbelievable to explain, but
Yep.
you're just never really sure. So we'll keep an eye out.
Yeah, yeah.
Any other questions or anything? Does anyone have any questions or queries?
So with these, is there anything inside?
Yeah, it's a nice, this was washed up. I'm pretty sure I found this one over at Coochie, which you don't really find them there. They're the Bayside, and they should be bigger. So with that mermaid, I made her tail out of this, but they're really, it's like a flat mussel and chewy and yummy. Some people don't like them, like my kids don't. But put vinegar in it, salt and pepper, curry,
Yeah.
and
Find the little ones in the sand.
yeah,
Yum.
and
Yeah, that's how big they grew, but they grow a lot bigger.
yep. And when I put a call out for shells. I need these quampi shells. People are like, oh, you just can't walk out to the mud flats and get them like you used to. And like Duffo said, I'll dive for you. I'm like, are you sure? So yeah, I got some from him. I got a lot from different people for that installation.
After that, eating them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, Yowda actually dropped some off for Mum. Yeah. And my son Preston, he had Yowda's necklace on last night. So the thing about Yowda, I love his work, and he carved some shells that we took up to the Cairns Indigenous Art Fair, and this collector from Melbourne bought the lot of them, and she said they're too cheap. That was in 2014 or 2015.
Yeah, right.
And I'm like, Yowda, where's your shells? Where's your carved shells? And he was like too busy building his home. So he's one of my favourite artists actually on the island. Like if there was someone could just grab him and say,
Just be
Here.
an artist.
just be an artist, do some carving, because he's got the most magnificent, exquisite work.
Tammy's got one, and same as Amy and Casey got one too, like that necklace.
Yep.